Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or simply hoping to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall.
Welcome back. Richard, my voice is even worse today than it was.
I have to ask. Full disclosure, it's cold in Florida.
Yeah.
Today's what do they call it?
A cold weather day.
Cold weather day.
Yeah, so...
You guys up north have snow days.
Uh-huh.
We have... That sounds so wimpy.
That's
we
right.
have cold weather days.
Uh-huh.
And if it goes below 40?
I don't know.
If there's some temperature cutoff, that if it goes below a certain level, it's called a cold weather day, and the students don't have to wear
the uniforms and stuff.
Regular uniforms, so that they don't freeze.
But what's been strange is that...
And it may be why Dr. B's voice sounds like very white.
It's so strange because I feel great, but I think it's because I have a lot of seasonal allergies.
Right.
And so, what happens is the weather got really nice and warm and springy, and then all the pollen came out.
That's right.
And then it got cold, and so now the pollen just kind of stays, and it's not raining like it's supposed to be raining for the pollen to get washed out. Yeah.
We have oak trees in this area of Florida, and they produce a very hyperallergenic dust.
Right.
Greenish yellow dust, which lands on everything, including your sinuses and lungs.
Yeah.
And it's a
But
tough time of year here.
if my voice was like this all the time,
you'd be singing at the Holiday Inns on Saturday night.
I don't know about singing, but I would definitely be on the radio.
You would be on the radio.
Welcome to 103 Jams.
That's right. All night jazz.
All night jazz.
Bernie the J. So, please, perhaps you won't talk as much today. There's a side benefit of that. So
don't count on it.
What's the topic today?
Today we're going to talk a little bit about...
We're going to continue talking.
Right, we're going to talk about school safety in our acknowledgement, awareness of National Public Schools Week.
Right.
And so we're going to... One of the other issues, we've talked about a number of things. We went through the history of education. We talked about funding issues. We talked about graduation rates. Mm-hmm. And today we're going to talk about school safety because that's another issue facing schools.
Right. And earlier in the week, we talked about this issue, the shooting in Parkland. We've said many, many times,
right.
And people around the country have said, there's something different about this shooting. Mm-hmm. This one it's staying in the news. And part of the reason is yesterday there was another walkout.
Right. We're recording this
students
on the day that it's being posted. So I'll be posting this later this morning.
Right. But it was yesterday, right?
Right. It was yesterday. Yeah. It was Wednesday, the 14th.
Right.
So
exactly 1 month,
mm-hmm.
because February 14th was the shooting, and yesterday was March 14th, exactly a month, and students had a 17-minute walkout.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so this issue stays in the news. State legislatures are grappling with this, and governors and presidents are all struggling with this issue. And one of the primary issues now is whether teachers should be armed. I mean, that's one of the debate points. Because we said earlier when we first started doing these podcasts that there has to be a reasonable discussion about what is the best intervention. And clearly, at least based on news reports, I'm not sure that we have found an effective intervention yet.
Right.
There hasn't been a real debate. There's been some action. There have been some decisions made. But I'm not sure that we've reached consensus, and I'm not sure that any of the proposals being passed, not just considered, but being passed by state legislatures, are going to stem the tide. Right.
So what we're going to do today, because we have come up with, or we've been working to develop sort of a outline that we think is an appropriate plan for managing some of those acute school violence and those kinds of things. Right. And we're going to present that on Saturday.
Right.
Because, we have been talking about the school shootings and school violence like that a lot over the past couple of weeks. But one of the things we wanted to focus on today is the fact that when we think about school safety extends far beyond just, a school shooter or something like that.
That's right. And on Saturday's program, we're going to give our humble proposal.
Right.
As to how to deal with this. And we think we have a right to wade in on this question because school shootings at some level, are a discussion of mental health and mental illness.
Right.
We know a little bit about that. But the other thing is they occur in a school climate, okay?
Right.
And so one of the things we decided that, or we discovered clearly that you need to think about is, what is the climate of the school?
Right.
Is it a school? Is it a school climate that protects members and where kindness and decency, or are there things happening in that school
Right.
that are exacerbating these underlying tendencies? We talk about the potential shooters.
Right.
Well, they're triggered by something, and one of the things we were very concerned about is this student was expelled, and when you expel a student, you're saying you are worth getting rid of. We don't want you anymore. And that sends a very strong message. And do we want to be sending those messages to those kinds of students? So it's a school climate issue, and therefore today we want to talk about what about the whole school climate?
Right.
Because school safety goes way beyond shooters.
Right.
And I think that we all, parents, teachers, and policymakers, ought to be more concerned about the broader issue of school safety, not just shooters.
Right. And we're also not really talking about sort of structural things like, the fire marshal and that kind of stuff, because of
Metal
course all of
detectors
those things are important. But, one of the things that I think is important that we think about is how the school manages potential crises and things. We're pulling some stuff from the National Association of School Psychologists, their website, and the link is in the show notes. But they have a slew of resources that are available to anyone who wants to just kind of click on and follow some of the links. But one of the things that they mention is war and terrorism.
Right.
I think that we don't really, we often don't consider the impact that all of our discussions about war and terrorism and safety, the impact that would have on a student's learning.
That's right. The students in New York were terrorized.
Right.
I mean, they truly were traumatized.
Right.
And we didn't really know the depth of that until school psychologists went and started talking to those kids. They felt very vulnerable because if those planes could fly into those buildings, and kids don't realize that these things are usually limited in some way.
Right.
When I was growing up, it was the threat of nuclear obliteration.
Right.
And
I'm still not sure how hiding under your desk, duck and cover. I don't know how that's going to save us from a nuke.
Duck and cover.
I remember thinking that in elementary school.
Right.
That, wait a minute, that doesn't make
The
sense.
films that I'm seeing, it looks like everything gets exploded, right? And so,
I don't think this building is going to be here. I'm not sure how this desk is going to help me.
but it made us feel like we were doing something, right? And but it wouldn't have purchased much duck and cover.
But it does increase anxiety. It increases stress.
But when
in
we
kids.
did those things, we were afraid.
Right.
We said, well, what? Because we didn't understand the Cold War. We didn't understand nuclear proliferation, and so we didn't understand it. We just were afraid of it.
Right.
And I'm sure that this generation of children fear the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So it's important that we think about those kinds of messages that we're sending and what's happening in those areas.
Did you, right after the Parkland shootings, a friend of mine is a teacher, and she said her students were coming to her, and they were terrified that it might happen in their school. It was highly unlikely that it would happen in their school, for many different reasons. But the children were truly concerned, really scared that this would happen in their school, and what should we do if it happens in our school? So the kids were profoundly affected by this.
Right.
I think kids all over the country were affected by it, but especially in Florida.
Right. Another major safety issue, crisis type issue that we have to worry about with our kids and at school is, how do we respond and what happens as far as youth suicide? Kids tend to feel unsafe when there's any significant loss, of course. But when another student takes their life, or when there's those kinds of issues, then or just another student dies from an accident or something, that has a profound effect on students as well. And I think that it's really challenging, and it goes beyond what I think a lot of the schools and administrators are really thinking about when we are considering the impact that these things have on youth. Because this is where my brain's going. Last week was marked the 3-week period from Parkland.
Right.
Here in Florida, in our area even, there continued to be people talking about it, and everybody's talking about the walkouts, and everybody's talking about there's still threats, and there's still other students being suspended and expelled for making threats and saying things at our local schools.
Right.
But last week they had the statewide mandated writing test.
Oh, that's right.
So they had their Florida Standards Assessment writing test last week.
Our high-stakes testing program is done in March and April.
Yeah. So that started last week. So you have students who aren't feeling safe,
Right.
and we're giving them these high-stakes tests that's going to inform incentive programs for teachers, incentive programs for schools, and then of course what happens with students.
Right.
So it's
they're concerned about dying in school, and
Right.
yet they're sitting down taking these tests.
remember Maslow's hierarchy.
Right. That's right. At the bottom was
Safety.
Every living. Can you? And then second was safety.
Yeah.
So
So it's, it really is an important issue that we think about as it relates to grief and feeling safe in your environment, whether it's safe from a school shooter or safe from cancer. We had a student in one of our local schools pass from cancer a couple of years ago. And, I was lucky enough to be able to go in and talk with the teachers and prepare them for how to talk with the students who may come to them and express concern, because students don't know.
they don't know. They don't understand these things.
Right.
So they're afraid, but they. I mean, it's that whole. They know enough to be afraid, but they can't sort out all the details, and they don't realize that they probably really are safe, and they don't need to worry about it. They're just going to worry.
Right.
Because they don't understand fully how these things occur and what they can do about them.
Right. Yeah. So it's really, I think that looking through some of these resources is going to be something important for not just people who work in the schools, but there's even a section for families and parents, so that they can have tips to talk about violence and talk about safety and those kinds of things.
And one of the other things that we talk about with school safety is bullying. The whole concept of bullying, because one of the things that has started to happen now is that it's easy to get another student in trouble.
Right.
The reporting is necessary. We say, if you suspect anything, if you hear anything, make sure you tell an adult.
Yeah.
Well, there's a little bit of vulnerability there, because if a student is targeted if a student is victimized, now the bullies have another way of getting kids in trouble, because they can say, well, so-and-so said that he was going to, all you have to do is say that.
Right.
And the administration is going to spring into action.
Right.
And some kids who are really innocent are going to get caught in this net. But the other thing is that we're not doing a very good job with bullying.
Right.
Kids the kind of student who has been bullied forever continues to be bullied in schools today, and we see them every week in our practice.
Absolutely.
These thin, shy kids who come in, and they're still being bullied. I mean, nobody knows it except us, but they're still being bullied.
Right.
So there's a great deal of work to do on a broad range of topics to provide for school safety.
Right. Yeah, and as it relates to that, we have to be careful how we're responding to students who express them at that, because we've certainly seen where a student is being bullied, and then complains or lashes out. And then that student gets Baker acted or gets arrested, and it's we're not.
We have cases like that. Kids who defend themselves, physically defend themselves, after being tormented for weeks, months, or years. Suddenly they're the ones who are in trouble. So I think we need to be more careful, more cautious, more thoughtful in our reaction to these things. Right now, there's a little overreaction on the part of administrators. Err on the side of caution, but let's be really careful about how we treat kids.
And we're going to talk a lot more about that on Saturday, because that's going to be an important podcast, I think. So, all right. Anything else that
could go on and on, but really, this is
check out the last couple of weeks of podcasts. We talked a lot about
And this one from NASP is good because there's no point reinventing the wheel.
Right.
NASP has done a really good job, really thoughtful, really thorough job of discussing the many aspects of school safety.
Right.
So don't reinvent the wheel. Go to this website, take a look at it, use the information that's there. Lots of information embedded in there.
Right.
Lots of good links that you can go to. But it's very comprehensive and very well done.
Absolutely. So, all right, that's it for today.
So kudos to NASP, right?
Absolutely. So, all right, in my radio voice.
In your new radio voice. I hope it stays for a while because it's actually sort of entertaining.
Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.
Oh, every day is a holiday.
Thanks for sharing this episode of the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will find all of our previous podcasts and much more. We would be honored if you would become a patron through patron.com, where any donation you can manage will go to the development and creation of more content. Just visit patreon.com/thementalbreakdown for more information. Thanks again for listening. Have an awesome day, and we look forward to being back in your feed tomorrow morning.